Welcome back. I'm proud to introduce Derek Yu, CEO of Purestake, who's going to give you some more detail on Moonbeam, a parachain project that's focused on Ethereum compatibility that Bjorn mentioned earlier. It's a really exciting project, so pay close attention. There's a little surprise at the end. Derek, take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Peter. Let me go ahead and share my screen here, and we can get right into it. So, yeah, as Peter mentioned, I'm Derek Yu. I'm the CEO of Purestake. We're building the parachain Moonbeam, and wanted to spend some time with you today to tell you a little bit about Moonbeam and give you our story. And when I was thinking about this, our story of Moonbeam is really pretty closely connected to the story of Polkadot and even to the story of Substrate. And as I was thinking about, this talk, I was trying to find kind of a hook or kind of a way to tell these like multiple kind of intertwined stories. And, I came up with this idea of blockchains as computers, right? I mean, blockchains have definitely this aspect of them that are kind of computer-like. And, there's some precedents for this, right? That, even on Ethereum, they marketed themselves once as the world computer. So, this kind of idea has been around for a while. But specifically, what I wanted to do was, the idea was, if we can look at the history of computing, maybe that'll give us some clues about, even the current blockchain environment, and maybe even some ideas about, how it's going to evolve into the future. And for some of you that have seen some of my talks before, you may know that I have kind of a specific interest in the history of technology. Part of that interest is I really do believe that there's patterns, in history, and particularly in the history of technology that repeat themselves. And so, often when you look at historical examples, I find that it's easier to kind of think about and reason about what's happening, and that at least for me gives me insight into what's happening, even in the present, and gives me ideas about what will happen in the future. So I hope to that this kind of lens through which we can look at the work that we're doing at Moonbeam, and even how we fit into Polkadot, and how I see Polkadot as fitting into the broader ecosystem. Hopefully this kind of lens will be useful to you, and that you'll get some insights out of it. So I wanted to kind of start with the story, using this kind of historical lens, with the idea of blockchains as computers in the 70s. So if you see here on the left-hand side, this is actually was a very kind of prominent computer of its day in the 70s. This is a DEC PDP-11, a prominent 16-bit computer of the 70s. Notably, like, this is where the C programming language and the Unix operating system were developed on a machine just like this one. And when I think about computing in the 70s, right, there were very few computers. They were very scarce, right, and the resources on them were very precious. And in fact, a lot of ingenuity went into stretching those resources really far. I mean, even you can see the user in a computer lab there. All those users were sitting in front of terminals or were connected to the same computer, and these time sharing features evolved that allowed many users to kind of share the resources of the system, and each user kind of had the illusion that they had the whole computer to themselves. And as a developer, when you were looking to deploy your application or kind of build software, this choice of platform was just kind of the almost the most important decision you were going to make, because it dictated everything about kind of what that software would look like, what kind of tools you're going to use, what who your users might be. And I just see a lot of parallels here, right? So if you look at blockchains kind of in the present, they have this kind of feel where it's kind of this, there's like this massive choice you have to make as a developer. You're going to choose a platform, that dictates a kind of a lot of the continuation. They're quite scarce. The resources on them are quite scarce. Ingenuity is going into trying to stretch those resources as far as possible. I just see kind of, a lot of parallels here. And, in that context, to explain, what, our platform is and what Moonbeam is, really, we've worked in close collaboration with Parity on creating an Ethereum implementation using Substrate, right? So we have, our project is to be a parachain, actually both on the Kusama as well as the Polkadot network. And the core feature set of our parachain is basically an Ethereum implementation. So that includes things like an EVM, a Web3 RPC. We've done work around the account and key structure to make that Ethereum-like. So we're really striving to create this very kind of Ethereum-like environment and a compatible environment, but attached as a parachain to Polkadot. And just to give you some sense of what this means, if you look over on the right, I used to take this screenshot on the right, which is a screenshot of MetaMask. I used Remix, which is an Ethereum developer tool. I deployed an ERC20 contract to Moonbeam. I connected MetaMask to Moonbeam. I'm like transacting that ERC20 on Moonbeam. So again, just a very kind of Ethereum-like environment. All of the tools that one uses on Ethereum like work with Moonbeam. And so that's kind of our idea, is to create this kind of smart contract option for developers on Polkadot, where they can use a lot of these familiar tools. And just kind of continuing the story about from the history of computing, as you moved kind of into the 80s and 90s, there was really this proliferation of platforms. I mean, just a huge number of platforms. And it's a little weird because today things have reconsolidated down to some smaller set of platforms, which coincidentally I think is going to happen also in blockchains. But I feel like we're kind of at this moment now where we're in this expansionary phase, right? Where there's just a lot of platforms out there. And to give you some sense, when I first started my career, I worked for a Unix tools company in the 90s, and I think we supported like 14 or 15 platforms. I mean, Unix platforms you've probably never heard of, things like Ultrix and True64 and SCO Unix was another one, and just all these platforms that kind of don't exist anymore now, but were once there in this kind of proliferated like platform environment. And in blockchains, same thing, with layer ones, and then you have meta protocols like Polkadot that are in turn creating an even further proliferation of platforms, right? And I consider us to be one of those where we're kind of also kind of expanding the number of platforms. So you have this kind of large number of platforms kind of at play. And one of the examples I think of, especially from this time in computing in the 80s, one of the prominent vendors was Oracle, right? One of the strategies they employed early on, that really made them a big company was a kind of a multi-platform strategy, right? So they aggressively ported their software to all of the existing kind of popular platforms of their day. And that's kind of one of the strategies that I think worked was quite effective for them. And when I think about that kind of multi-chain deployment context for blockchains, we see kind of a very similar thing happening here. And I just want to take a moment to talk about the kinds of projects that we're working with. And you can see some of those over on the right. I'm just going to highlight a few of them. For example, we're working with SushiSwap, which is one of the world's largest AMM-based DEXs. They'll be deploying their protocol to Moonbeam. Bitcoin.com Exchange is another project we're working with. We're building a new AMM-based protocol that's going to uniquely combine decentralized and centralized liquidity sources in a very interesting way. IDEX, is another decentralized exchange that has more of an order book based system. They've really done some very clever things to make for a centralized exchange kind of look and feel, but still retaining kind of a non-custodial model and allowing users to have control of their keys. So we're working with them, and I would mention also Human Protocol, which is a partnership we announced today, which is not in the DeFi, in the DeFi area, that are really doing some pretty exciting work right at the intersection of human and artificial intelligence and tackling problems that kind of can't be solved strictly with one approach or the other. And I'm going to stop there because you'll hear a bit more from them a bit later. And so what is the common thread between all of these different protocols that and different project teams we're working with? For many of them, they're pursuing a multi-chain deployment. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that in particular, if they're looking at a deployment that spans Ethereum and Polkadot, they can use a single code base to drive both deployments, right? So they can use a single code base that drives their Ethereum deployment as well as a deployment to Polkadot via Moonbeam. And I think that's quite attractive, from from the perspective of the project, because that means that they can kind of focus on one implementation versus needing to manage multiple implementations of their protocol or of their application. And so we're kind of seeing that, and the drivers for them are that I think this summer's run up in gas prices, the DeFi-led run up in gas prices on Ethereum has led even successful projects to understand that there's just some set of users and use cases they can't serve well, from Ethereum. So that's one driver. But they also kind of are quite interested in Polkadot and want to get access to all of the assets and kind of new markets that are being created on Polkadot. So there's both like a push and a pull there. So extremely kind of interesting things happening these days. And so just to kind of tie back and continue this theme of the history of computing, when I think about kind of going from that platform era into the 90s and the aughts, I really think about all of the specialization and connectivity that started happening. And I just want to take a quite simple example, right? So just an early internet and web example. So you can see here on the left is a Mac running an early version of Netscape Navigator, black and white even. And then, you have a rack-mounted web server on the right that's running, let's say, Linux and Apache. And I just think it's worth thinking about for a second here. Think about like the kind of intense amount of like innovation and specialization that even happened to get to this point, right? I mean, think about even the hardware on the left, like all of the user interface components, like the graphical user interface, the mouse, the keyboard, all of these things that were created to make it easier for humans to use that computer. As compared to the web server, where it was really optimized. It's optimized for space, heat, power, and the ability to serve a lot of users' requests that are coming in. Really quite a bit of specialization, both on the hardware and on the software. But the thing that the internet did was allow you to kind of create an application that spans both of these systems, and you get this kind of whole is greater than the sum of its parts, kind of effect. And that's kind of really the thing that I see happening. Like you already heard from Fabi earlier that this is already starting to happen in Polkadot, right? Where you have different teams that are building specialized chains, that are specific to a particular use case and highly optimized for that use case. And they're building these like on Polkadot, right? And by building them on Polkadot, you have this kind of way where they can interact with each other. And so this is something that I see is like quite different than kind of these previous mental models, and is extremely like important to me, and was a large reason of why why we're building where we are. And in that context, if I kind of put Moonbeam in this context, we're obviously going to be one of these parachains. We are specialized in our own way in creating this Ethereum-like environment. And we are also working on integrations, right, with other chains. To start, a lot of the partners we're working with are, very interested in asset integrations, right? So they're interested in getting access to these assets, particularly these DeFi protocols that were working with us. So, our job then is to, build substrate-based integrations to bring assets from other, parachains in the Polkadot ecosystem to Moonbeam. And then we're going to represent them, on Moonbeam as ERC20s in our Ethereum-like environment. And the good part about that is then they're compatible and can be used immediately with all of these existing protocols that are looking to deploy on Moonbeam, DEXs, lending and borrowing protocols, and other projects. For them, from those projects' perspective, they're outsourcing a lot of this underlying infrastructure and integration work to us. That's something that is really where we see a lot of the work going as these parachains launch on our side is around these kind of scenarios. And just to kind of play it forward a bit, right? I mean, if that's kind of almost the current into the future a little bit, I mean, where did kind of the computing go from the aughts and onwards? And I give this example here of I work personally on an app in the kind of collaboration and communications space. Something think of kind of like a Telegram, but with other kind of meetings and video features in it. And the application I worked on, I'll call it of some scale, but not of the largest scale. And just to give you some sense, so the question is, what kind of infrastructure was supporting this application? And I can tell you, even from this, relatively modest example of a cloud-based collaboration app, a modern one, the environment that I was working in, we had at least a dozen major kind of subsystems at the top level. So things like a messaging subsystem, a voice subsystem, video, notification system for popping for letting people know when they had new messages, and other things. A whole set of data subsystems that were responsible for collecting kind of events and processing them, and offering them up in different formats for analytics. So you had all these major subsystems, and even if you drill down on just the messaging system, then you have even yet another layer of platform as a service kind of offering, this cloud-based offering. So database as a service, orchestration, an API gateway, and the list goes on. And then even drill down under there, and you'd actually start getting maybe to some of the actual compute elements, storage elements. And so the point is that even for just this one cloud application with a mobile user experience, you kind of have what turns out to be thousands of service elements that are kind of jointly working together to create this simplified user experience. And so, I mean, we're certainly not like there in blockchain, but I do think this gives us some clues as to the direction in which things are going to move, right? This kind of increasingly specialized systems and increasing kind of layers of abstraction that are all in the service of increasingly kind of simplified user experiences, right? The users can't be aware of all the systems that they're interacting with, which is largely the case now. So there needs to be these abstraction layers, and that's become that's proven to be quite powerful kind of in the regular Web 2 world. So in that context, where I see kind of Moonbeam and Polkadot in the future, serving a role would be, we kind of see ourselves as powering a lot of these integrations, right? So if you have a lot of these specialized services, such as storage service, identity service, oracles, you're going to need a place to kind of combine those different services to create this kind of whole is greater than the sum of its parts, type of use case or application. And so that's where we see, Moonbeam on the longer run playing a role within Polkadot, is to provide this kind of integration capability, and hopefully an abstraction layer so that we can shield the user from a lot of the underlying complexity, but still have, the entire infrastructure be, Web3 based, right? So to avoid a lot of the problems that are kind of well known at this point around Web 2 kind of cloud infrastructures. So that's kind of where I see things headed as we, move into the future. And I just wanted to conclude with some thoughts here, based on kind of what we've talked through here in this talk. And so starting with these systems, these simple kind of one app, one computer kind of systems from the 70s, the PDP-11, to this modern cloud-based infrastructure consisting of thousands of components, powering these mobile and other kind of simplified user experiences. When I think about this kind of path of evolution that computing has taken, and think about what that could mean for blockchains, I'm struck by a few things. I mean, one thing is this. What is it that's less interesting to me, or that I don't think is important? That's kind of a faster blockchain, right? I mean, it's for sure an interesting thing, and maybe a necessary thing to have faster blockchains. But I kind of see this narrative these days that occupying a lot of the airwaves of, hey, if only we had a blockchain that had the capacity of X, that could handle Visa's transaction load, or handle X, Y, or Z kind of load. I just don't think that that's kind of what's going to dictate the way forward, and kind of the evolution of Web3 based systems. It won't dictate the way forward any more than a faster PDP-11 was kind of the defining way forward for compute systems. There's only so much you can do as a single system. I mean, what I think is much more important is the ability to create specialized systems, right? So specialized purpose-driven systems that are optimized for particular use cases, and having a variety of those that can occupy different niches that are in the ecosystem. That's kind of what happened on the compute side. That's what I expect to happen on the blockchain side. And it's only so far that you can get if you have a specialized system operating on its own. So it's kind of this context to provide a way that these specialized systems can interact with each other. That's so important. And when I think about it in that light, its substrate is exactly the technology that enables all of these specialized systems to be created. And Polkadot is exactly this context within which all of these specialized systems can work together, can cooperate, and can create these whole is greater than the sum of its parts effects. And so that's really why we're so bullish on Polkadot, and that's why we're kind of excited to just make our own contribution in our own way to to this ecosystem. And yeah, I just wanted to end with that we'd obviously would love to talk to you if if you have a project, you're pursuing a multi-chain strategy, you're looking for an easy place to build on Polkadot. I think that we'd love to hear from you in our on Twitter and our Telegram and our Discord. And I would say also that I kind of teased it a little bit before. The partnership with Human Protocol that we announced today. We wanted to give an opportunity to kind of show you a little bit more about that. And so we have a little bit of a surprise here for you, where you can learn a bit more about Human Protocol.
Hi, I'm Lonnie Ray, and I run operations at the Human Protocol. I'm here today with our partners at Moonbeam and Polkadot to show you what we've been working on. First, I'm going to show you an application that utilizes human technology, HCAPTCHA. You can log into HCAPTCHA's interface, and when you log in, you can specify the type of machine learning data labeling that you would like to do and the accuracy that you need. And that utilizes Human Protocol technology in order to distribute those tasks to a network of hundreds of millions of people. You've probably interacted with HCAPTCHA before because they serve these CAPTCHAs across 15% of the internet. And whenever you see this logo, you're actually interacting with Human Protocol technology already. Now, we're really excited because we're expanding beyond HCAPTCHA and we're adding new ways to interact with our technology through our partnership with Moonbeam and Polkadot. We're adding new interface tools like Intel CVAT to the chain, and we're finding new ways to make it easy to bring your own interface so that you can receive data in the format you prefer. I'm going to hand this over to one of our partners, Harry, who's a developer that came to us through our open source community.
So we're just going to jump right in and go ahead and upload our manifest files. So once this manifest file is submitted, it gets picked up by our open source core infrastructure, which then puts it out as a CVAT job. So this entire infrastructure took me about one sprint to build. But what this means is you and your team can start using CVAT or also the tools that you guys already prefer and basically get them hooked onto the Human Protocol network in less time than one sprint. Oh, look here, it seems like our CVAT job is up. So what on the other side, what the worker is basically going to see is a new task being posted here, and they're going to go ahead and open this and see the list of tasks under this job that's been uploaded. So as we can see, this job has labeling options of airplane, bus, car, and human. So the worker is just basically going to click on one of these jobs, utilize CVAT's tool to just select the correct label here. So bus would be correct here. We can also go ahead and label more items here. For example, this car here would be perfect. And another car here. So once the worker is done with the labeling, they'll basically go up to this panel here, see what and how many items have been labeled, and basically submit this job. And once this job is submitted, we're going to see that automatically the payouts happen to the worker.
So what's so exciting about this is how easy it is to add new interfaces to the chain and to utilize Human Protocol's technology with the types of tools that you already use and like, and that your team enjoys. Now that we've done this, it's even easier, so it can be done in a single sprint. And what we're doing now is working on bringing a lot of that labeling capacity to main chain opportunities. So building that bridge to the existing network and making that safe for our partners. If you want to get involved, one of the things that we're really interested in right now is having people help us work on tools for safety. So staking and incentive alignment for good use of our tools and chain, and then also working on things like content moderation so that we can begin the process of migrating some of this capacity to mainnet. We're very excited, and if you're also interested in getting involved with data labeling or knowledge mining, we're going to have a type form on the website. You can check out our GitHub, dig in, see all of our repos. It's all at hmt.ai and the GitHub, and type form are right on the front page. It was nice to be here. Bye.
Thank you, Lonnie. Thank you, Derek. The lead was a little bit buried there, but if you didn't know, Human Protocol is the most used dApp in the world that you may never have heard of. As Lonnie mentioned, about 15%, probably more, of all internet traffic, bot blocking CAPTCHA traffic runs through Human, hundreds of millions of monthly active users. So we're really excited to have them building on Polkadot. I think this is a really excellent example of Web 2 and Web 3 really coming together to power the transition to a better web for everyone. Thank you very much, Derek, and I'll join you all in the next session with Ontology. Thank you.
Thanks.